Hey guys, Snoozy here. Today we're going to go over the Orb Sorceress build. This will be an energy shield build. If you don't like energy shield, you can tweak a couple different things and a lot of it will stay the same. A straight vitality build will do more damage, but I think the energy shield is going to be tankier. And you don't have to spam potions or really ever worry about health or mana as long as you're not standing in too much stuff. With that said, let's go ahead and get straight on into it. The Orb Sorceress is one of my favorite classes that I've played. I've spent a lot of hours on this back in the day, back in, '09 or whatever, when this was the meta build. So we're going to go ahead and get straight into the stats. Just like every other Sorceress, really, you're going to have enough strength to wear your Spirit, and that's going to be 156. Just make sure that you can still wear your Spirit even when you weapon swap. Sorceresses, this usually isn't a problem because none of their orbs really have strength or stats that would affect this. So if you're just swapping gear around, make sure that you have at least 156 strength. Your dexterity doesn't matter. You'll just need enough dexterity really to wear your coat of arms if you put it in a flail. Personally, I prefer putting it in a crystal sword instead, but if you are going to put it in a flail, make sure you have enough dexterity to wear it. For your vitality, if you're fully decked out with life skillers and the life small charms, just ignore it. Put no points into it. However, if you're like me and you're doing this on a live server, I never have those things. A nice sweet spot I found is about 500 life roughly before battle orders. And then after that, I don't really worry about it anymore. The rest will just go into energy shield. So if you have all the life skillers and all the charms, and your life's already over 500, skip vitality, dump it all into energy shield. Since this build is in high-end gear with perfect gear, everything went into energy shield just to kind of showcase it. Resistances are going to be low on this build, which isn't really a huge issue due to energy shield. We'll get into the mechanics behind energy shield later on, that way you guys can see. But really the big resistance that's going to matter is your poison resistance here. With that done, we're going to go straight into our skills. We're going to start with the off ones. You're going to want 1 point into warmth as always. This is just nice. With your plus skills, you're going to get some nice bonuses in here for 1 point. That's going to help with your mana recovery. Lightning skills are always going to be at least 1 point into static field. This is just nice for bosses like Diablo or Baal, whoever you're fighting. With that said, we are an energy shield build, so we are going to put everything all the way down to energy shield. And we are going to actually max telekinesis and energy shield in this build. These would be near the last things you would max, because this is going to be your defensive layer. Since you're a sorceress, you can use teleport to avoid a lot of the damage in the game, so I would not stress these to be first when you're maxing them. For your cold, you're going to go ahead and max Ice Bolt, and we're also going to put 1 point into Frozen Armor. And we're going to need 1 point in everything to get all the way down to Blizzard. And then your cold mastery, which is very important for this build. You're only going to put in enough points to hit this minus 195% to enemy cold resistance. And that's also going to be including your gear. I put it in exactly for minus 195, so I can swap my gear any way I want. And I will always have that minus 195. If you are sure you're not going to be gear swapping, you can just math it out. I believe it's in here. You'll see somewhere with your minus lightning res. Yeah, so I'm at minus 210%. This is overkill. I just did this so I can swap gear. Minus 195 is the maximum, and that's because of the Sunder Charms. Sunder Charms will break the immunity of the monster and put them at 95 resistance. If you have minus 195 resistance, that'll put them at negative 100 cold resistance. You cannot push a monster below negative 100, so anything over negative 195 is overkill. The ordering of what I would max here is your Frozen Orb first, of course, Ice Bolt to get the synergy going. Make sure you have 1 point, and everything else that you're going. And now here's kind of where it could split apart a little bit. I would recommend maxing telekinesis next, and then getting your cold mastery up. The thing to remember is, since you can't push a monster below negative 100, you don't need to put a ton of points in this right away unless you're specifically trying to farm a place that has cold immunes. If you're just farming Mephisto or something that cold immunes aren't a huge issue, you don't need to put a ton of points in this right away. So if you're not farming cold immunes, I would max energy shield next and then cold mastery to get your damage back up. However, you could flip it, and instead of doing the energy shield, you could put this in here to ensure you're doing the maximum amount of damage, because Orb as the main skill itself doesn't have the most damage in the world. So it's up to you on how you'd want to max this. My recommendation is Frozen Orb, Ice Bolt, Telekinesis, put a couple points into here, maybe push it to like -100 or -80, somewhere in there. Max energy shield, then come back to cold mastery. As you can see, I still have 7 skill points remaining. Personally, I would allocate these into Blizzard since we're already maxing Ice Bolt and Blizzard hits really hard. It's up to you where you'd want to put it. Some people might put it into Warmth to get a little bit more mana regen. I don't really think you need that if you have the gear. If you want to go for Nostalgia, you can go all the way down to Thunderstorm and Lightning Mastery. Mostly just Nostalgia. It's not going to do much. I feel like the Blizzard is going to be the best points here for you. So let's go ahead and get into the gear. We're going to cover a couple setups here. This, what I'm wearing now and what I'm going to go over first, is going to be if you're looking for pure damage. You do not care about, your resistances a super amount. You don't care about Magic Find. This is just if you want to kill stuff as fast as possible. Maybe you're pushing 99, so you just want to kill stuff and get going. So we're going to start off Death's Fathom. It's going to be your main weapon here. It does have a 5/5 perfect die cold facet in it. This is what the facet would look like for those of you who aren't aware. When you die, you have a 100% chance to cast level 37 Blizzard on top of you. You can use dies or level ups. You shouldn't be planning on dying. I never really understood the huge difference on why people want the dies. Yeah, if you die, maybe the Blizzard will kill a couple monsters, but I'd rather save a couple bucks here and there, who cares? You are going to want to try to get the -5s. If you want to save money and go on a budget, get -3s plus 5s, because you can always make that up with your cold mastery. And since we do have 7 skills left, you can always make that up. But do keep in mind this character is a level 99, so at level 92 you would complete this build and have no extra points available. So if you're going to level up a bit, you could probably save some money by getting like -3s or something like that. So for the Death's Fathom, it does have lightning and fire resistance. For this, if you're following this exact gear set, try to get a higher fire resistance than a lightning, but your main priority is going to be get the most cold skill damage you can. This will roll between a 15 and 30. I think on live I have a 23 for my Frost Nova build. Perfect ones of these are very expensive, especially with the current meta of cold sorcs in general. Very expensive. So you could save money here. You won't do as much damage. You really don't need perfect gear for this build to have fun. Since we're doing damage, Nightwing is going to be your go-to. Again, that's going to have the 5/5 facet in it. I forget what the bottom range of the cold skill damage is. Is it like 5 or 7? And it goes up to 15. 15 being perfect. You'll get your 2 skills with the facet in there. You get the negative enemy cold resistance. But the important part that you're looking for here is going to be the cold skill damage. You're really going to want to try to get the highest one you can there. For this build, we're just going to use a Tal Amulet just because it's easy. You could also use a Mara's if you wanted, and you're really trying to get the resistances up. If you're following this exact build, you don't need Castrate on this. I mean, you could even use a Rare Amulet if you don't want to try to use a Tal's. I threw a Tal's on here because sometimes I do swap to a Magic Find setup, and Tal's fits in there perfect, so it's one less thing to swap. Spirit Monarch, for this build, if you're building it exactly as we are, you do not need a perfect one because we are 115 cast rate with a perfect. So even if you got a terrible one, you're still going to hit your breakpoint of 105 faster cast rate. So that can be really any Spirit Monarch, but it does have high vitality and high mana, so you might want to work on those more so than the cast rate for this. We're going to use Trine Gloves specifically because with gear I don't need more mana regen, and a +1 fire is really just so Warmth gives me mana regen. If you don't like these, you can use Mage Fists instead. I like these because of the Sunder. We're getting that minus resistance to cold, and these do have 30 cold res. So if you don't like those or you don't have them, you can use Mage Fists. The big thing here is that 20 faster cast rate to make sure we're hitting breakpoints. Since this is an energy shield build, we are going to be using 2 Sojas for that $1 skills. That will affect your battle orders, so it's nice to have that flat 20 mana and the increased maximum mana by 25%. Those are really nice to have, but they're not needed. They're not hitting any breakpoints. You can swap them for really whatever you want. You might have more mana issues if you're not using them, but you don't necessarily have to have them. For your belt, it's going to be the Arachnid's Mesh, like pretty much every sorceress build ever. That +1 to all skills is just huge, and the 20% faster cast rate lets us hit breakpoints easily. And since this is an energy shield build, the maximum mana of 5% is really nice to have. Now, this build does not require these boots. These boots are just an example of something that's really nice to have. These boots on live, on Battle.net would be really expensive, multiple high runes, not required. Run walk is nice, even though we teleport everywhere just for when you're in town. If you can manage walking slower, you can cut that faster run walk off and not care about it. You should be trying to look for the tri-res, since we do want to keep our resistances above 0 at least. And on top of that, you could also get stuff like Magic Find, Dexterity if you need it, stuff like that. But really, what's really nice about these boots is the strength. Really, every stat's really nice. This is stuff you're going to look for. That faster hit recovery comes in clutch. You can make that up with your charms if you'd rather, but with that faster hit recovery, we are hitting our 60% faster hit recovery breakpoint because of the 55 provided by Spirit. That's a flat. That's always there. So the 10% makes us hit the breakpoint. However, you could use small charms. You could use, instead of a lifer here, maybe you want to use a faster hit recovery. You can make it up other places. This is kind of an open slot with just what you can afford. The standard War Travs also fit here. Honestly, on live, I'm probably going to use War Travs over these boots anyways, just because I don't want to pay so much for them. But these boots are amazing for the build. So for our alternative build, we have the 3-piece of the Taurashas with an Oculus and a Shaco. So with the gear swapped out, you'll see that we are still hitting the 105% faster cast rate, and our faster hit recovery is still 65. So if you really wanted to go hard on the Magic Find here, what you would end up doing is putting on your War Trav boots here and swapping these out, and then trying to get that faster hit recovery somewhere else. Realistically though, if you're doing Magic Find, you're going to want the War Travs. I mean, the extra Magic Find up to 30 to 50 is pretty big. Not to mention, I mean, they're great boots, 10 strength, 10 vitality. The thing with these though is if you're going to be swapping gear from like damage to, say, Magic Find, you're going to want to really be careful with it, because if you set this Magic Find gear on and you have your War Travs equipped, when you go to swap over to, say, like your Tri-Res boots or your Alder's boots or the Silkweaves, you're going to lose that 10 strength when you go to damage. Then you're not going to be able to equip your Monarch. So just be careful that you have your stats set up that you can swap real quick. So the gear that we put on for the Magic Find is going to be the Oculus with an Istarune. The Istarune is not required. It does give you, 30 Magic Find if placed in a weapon, and 25 if in armor, helmets, or shields. That's just a standard 20 to all res. You get life, mana, you get your cast rate, you get skills. The downside with this item is the 25% chance to cast teleport when you get struck, which can be annoying. It can move you around a bunch. But for 80 Magic Find, if you're trying to make a Magic Find build, it's great. For best in slot for the Magic Find here, for this particular build, we're going to go with the Taurash's Guardianship, and that's the Tal armor. And we are going to ist it, because it is more Magic Find than a P Topaz. However, for most people, myself included, I would use a P Topaz instead of an Istarune in here. We're going to go back to the tried and true Harlequin Crest Shaco. 2 skills, 2 attributes, life, mana, all great, and it's going to be isted for the maximum amount of Magic Find. Again, perfect Topaz, perfectly acceptable in here. I would use a perfect Topaz over an Istarune, but Istarune is the best in slot for it. The belt, we do give up the Arachnid's Mesh, and that way we can go ahead and get the set bonus, which is 65% more Magic Find. And if you're noticing that we are getting faster cast rate from the armor set and from the belt. So you're going to want to make sure you have all three of these pieces before you transition in to make sure you're getting all of your breakpoints. Realistically, this should be good enough for Magic Find. This is generally what I'll use. You come out at 348% Magic Find, which is a decent amount to me, especially for the damage that you're still getting. This would be perfectly acceptable in like a single player game. It would be rough in an 8-player game though. So we'll go ahead and put back on our damage because that's how I prefer to play this build. Now, if you were not wanting the full-blown damage from the Ormus robes here, you could swap to that Viper Magi. It has more cast rate, so it gives you a little bit more leniency if for some reason you're struggling with your cast rate here. And on top of that, since we'd put an rune in here, since this is going to be more of a defensive armor, you're going to get 50 to all resistances. So that would bring us up to, in Hell, 75 to all res. But you will be losing 20% cold damage. The one thing I didn't mention about the Ormus robe is I believe they can roll almost every skill for a sorceress except for Orb and Cold Mastery. I don't think either of those can roll on here. I picked a Blizzard one because that'll be the secondary skill we'll use, just because even with the 1 point in it, it's still hitting for 3.8, 4,000 damage. And if you do continue to level up and keep putting points into it, it's just going to do more and more. I'm actually not going to put these points in, that way it's not completely showcasing a maxed out level 99. You'll see it, what it is like a level 92 build. For our inventory, it's going to be the standard cold charm or cold sunder charm, just so we can always make sure we're hitting everything in the game. Cold immunes now are a negative 100 resistance with this build. Everything in this game is a negative 100 cold resistance as long as you have this charm on. If you are not farming areas that have cold monsters, you can get rid of this. This will make your resistances easier. You can put another skiller in here, life, faster hit recovery. If you're doing magic find, maybe some magic find charms in here. Whatever you need, but we are going to use the life cold skillers. I would swap some of these out for faster hit recovery if you're going to take your boots out or something like that. Torch Annie, pretty standard. Highest you can get, the better. Don't break the bank on these though. These are just going to be the 20 to life, 5 to all resistance small charms. Again, these are just the best in slot. You really don't need these. You can get the single resistances that go up to 11 to try to balance them out. Since we are energy shield, just try to keep these above 0. And then if you're doing magic find and you don't care about your resistances in life, you can just stock up with your magic find small charms in here. I mean, really, if you're just doing Mephisto and you're doing the trick, you can just dump as much magic find in here. You know, the more skillers you take out, the less damage you're going to do, the less runs you're going to get in per hour, but you will have higher magic find. For our mercenary, we'll be going with the standard Endariel's Visage. This will have a Rao rune in it because Endariel's Visage by default does have minus 30% fire resistance. You put a Rao rune in there, that way it has it's just normal. There's no penalty for it. If you are super rich, what people do is a jewel that has 15% attack speed with 30 fire resistance on it. Those jewels are ridiculously expensive. That's min-maxing stuff to the point where, I mean, you're rich at that point, or you got lucky and you decided to do it. But the Endariel Visage, non-ethereal is good enough for the build. Ethereal would be best in slot. Fortitude is you're going to be your best in slot again for your mercenary. Technically, this should be ethereal. However, it doesn't have to be. A non-ethereal one works fine, and then you can also take and move this non-ethereal one to another character if you wanted, like an Amazon, or maybe you're running a Fury Druid, something like that. Insight just for the mana regen, because we are an energy shield build. We want to make sure our mana is always capped up. You want to make sure you get that level 17 meditation aura. The base is as high as you can, so you're going to want like a Thresher, you know, the Cryptic Axe is good. You could even do a Colossus Vulge, but that's a lot of strength. I really don't recommend that because it's also really slow. But just the best you can put in here. Personally, I prefer Threshers, and that's what I would do. And if it's early ladder and you can't find something, A non-ethereal thresher will hold up for a very long time. In fact, on live, I think I just recently got an ethereal one. I think it's a great poleaxe instead, and it still works fine. I just had really bad luck trying to find a good base for this ladder. So now that we went through all the inventory, our alternative gear, the mercenary gear and stuff, we're going to talk about the breakpoints. I know we covered these a little bit, but it's important to make sure that you are hitting this 105% faster cast rate. The one thing that I did not mention very well is when you are using your magic find setup here. We'll go ahead and get that equipped real quick. You see how your cast rate does drop to 105 cast rate. This means if you are going to use this exact gear setup, you have to have a perfect spirit. If this is a 34% faster cast rate instead of a 35, you will not be able to hit your breakpoint. And it's important that you're going to hit that breakpoint. The difference between 104 and 105 is a whole breakpoint. That's just how the game works. That 1% actually does matter. Now, for the faster hit recovery, because we did keep these boots on and we didn't swap to the war travs, which I personally would do, you would, if you swap to the war travs, you have to make it up in here and make sure you're still getting a 60% faster hit recovery. If you can work your charms out, the next breakpoint to hit for this would be 86. I would recommend a minimum of 60. If you can hit that 86, that's perfect though. So let's go ahead and put our damage gear back on. Get the Fathom and the Nightwing back on here. Alright, so I think we have all of our gear back on. Now let's get back into the energy shield mechanics. Well, we're still talking about mechanics here and on how it works and why I don't care that my resistances aren't maxed. So energy shield makes it so you will take damage to your mana instead of your life. Now, this is not at a 1-to-1 ratio. As you can see, it says here, mana consumed per damage 75%, and that's because we maxed telekinesis. Telekinesis is the synergy to energy shield. It's the only one it has, and it reduces that down. So as long as you have telekinesis maxed, for every 1 point damage you would take, you're only going to take 0.75 damage in energy shield. Now, I don't know if you can actually take, a decimal point of it, but that's how it works. So if you took 100 damage, you would only lose 75 mana. So hopefully that makes some sense. And because we did max energy shield, you have a 91% absorb. That means if you would take 100 damage, 91% of that, so 91 damage would go to the mana, and you would take 9 life to your life pool. Now, what's important to note here is, and the math gets sloppy because I'm not a math genius, but hopefully this makes sense. Energy shield does not care about your resistances. Your health cares about your resistances. So if you take 100% of lightning damage, or 100 damage of lightning, you will take 91% of that will go to your mana. But since you have mana consumed per damage of 75%, you're not going to take 91 points of lightning damage to it. However, that 9 damage that goes to your life does care about lightning resistance, and lightning resistance will affect that. Since we have the 75% lightning resistance, that 9 damage we'd only take 75% of that to our life. So it's important to note that you can skimp on your resistances if you are energy shield. Rule of thumb for me personally is keep everything above 0. The best thing that you can do is to keep that poison resistance as high as you can, because poison resistance will always go through your energy shield. So keep that as high as you can. And the one other thing you can do with your gear set here is with the Tau Rashas, if you find something else, you can get reduced poison duration to really help with that, because poison absolutely does get annoying when you're trying to do anything and you get poisoned. I don't think we did talk about on the flip. It's going to be the standard call to arms, and it's going to be with the spirit shield. This is pretty standard across sorceress setups. The reason for this is going to be your battle orders and to get your +2 skills on top of that. The meta way of doing this would be to use a 5-socketed staff that does have at least 1 point in frozen armor or shiver armor or chilling, whichever you prefer, and then 3 points into energy shield. this will get you a higher percent captured here. So that's the current meta for that. Those staffs are rare and very expensive. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to come out and buff yourself and your mercenary with that battle orders. Swap back to your Fathom because that's +3 compared to the +1. And they're both spirits, so they're always +2. This is on players 8, I believe. Yep. So I just wanted to show you, this is kind of slow. So this would be imitating if we had, 7 other players in here, and let's just say they're leeching. It's not the fastest for carrying. This is a lot better with smaller party count games. But at the same time, it's not terribly slow. Stuff doesn't die instantly, but you're not dying instantly. You're just kind of cruising along. Works decent enough. If you're wearing the Magic Find gear, I really would not recommend doing this. Your damage is going to be too low. Your damage is actually almost half. I think I saw the Magic Find gear, your orb top end is about 800. So I really wouldn't do this. What I do is I drop blizzards on top of their heads just because it does decent amount of damage since we did max Ice Bolt. And you just continue on cruising here through the Chaos Sanctuary. I like to choose the Chaos Sanctuary for my tutorials because everybody knows what it is. The layout doesn't change, the mob types don't change. It's the same bosses, they have the same health all the time. It's just pretty static. On top of that, it's a pretty good place to farm, honestly. Especially now that you have a Sunder Charm and you can get anything you need done this way. The one thing that I would like to mention, and I should have mentioned this in the mechanics, but I didn't, I forgot. If you notice how the Frozen Orb shoots out and explodes, each of those projectiles will hit a monster and then it despawns. So if you shoot them into packs, you'll notice that you're missing some of them as they come out. Well, since they despawn, that means they technically shotgun. So if you get that orb, now there's no monster, we'll shoot it out here. See how it comes out and then it shoots all those out? If you have a big enough monster like Diablo, you can make sure he gets hit by those spikes more than once. Even with Venom Lords, they're kind of big enough you take quite a bit of that damage. It's really nice. That's going to be your single target damage for this build, and it does kind of make it difficult if the monsters are running around and not beating on a mercenary. Diablo's AI, sometimes he just follows you around and refuses to hit the mercenary. But if you can land that on there, you'll do a huge amount of damage to him. And as you can see so far, even on player 8, and we're not using Ethereal Endarials, we're not using Ethereal Fortitude on him, he's still staying alive pretty quick. And I'm not feeding him potions. As you can see, my inventory's been gone the whole time. Our mana, our life, everything's staying up perfectly fine. And this is due to the fact we have that insight on him, which is providing us that providing us that mana regen via the meditation aura. On top of that, and this isn't meta, this is just what I prefer, the meta would be a might aura, so he does more damage himself. However, I'm lazy. I like prayer. I have such low health that his prayer ticks actually give me a decent boost, and if you noticed, my life and mana have not been going down. They just stay maxed up all the time. I haven't used any potions. I didn't even bring potions with me. Ideally, what you're going to want to do is bring full jubes with you. And if you notice, this is an 8-person Diablo. I am not staticking him just to show the damage. If you hit your orb just right, look at the chunk there. It is all about landing that orb in the correct position to do the most amount of damage. So I know you might be like, well, I don't play with people. I don't need, the most damage. I like to play solo, but I play online because I like the ability to trade with people and get some of these items, that I might not find by myself. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to drop this down to a player 1 count right here, okay? And I think you'll see the difference pretty quickly on how quick you can actually clear. Since we already did this on a player 8 and showed that, I'm not going to really do a full clear here. I'm just going to kind of skip through a little bit here just to kind of show how much damage you truly have on a player 1. A lot of people say, that orb doesn't have the damage, but if you're not trying to carry party 8s, its damage is fine. I think people get too worked up about, oh, well, my character has to be able to carry an 8-party game. That's up to you. I mean, if that's what you find fun with Diablo, like maybe you're playing single player and you only want to do party 8, that's fine. That's perfectly acceptable. If that's what's making Diablo fun for you, go ahead. As we showed, you can do player 8. It is not the fastest. You know, Chain Lightning would probably be a lot faster than this. I'm not quite sure if it's faster than a Nova. I'm not sure which one would be faster of those two. I haven't played Lightning in a long time. But it's pretty safe. And we did end up getting poisoned, and with poison on, you'll see that prayer isn't enough to keep me alive, but look at how fast it's coming back now. So sometimes if you're going to be in like a really heavy area that's going to be a lot of poison immunes, you're going to want to make sure that you have maybe an antidote potion stack here, and then your full juves over here. But the build works. It's fun. It's tanky. You do have to worry about poison. And it is a little bit difficult to get your resistances because, I mean, I am using these kind of cheater ones over here, 5 all, 20 life. How many of those have you ever found in your life? Think you're going to get 10 of those? You're going to be doing a lot of trading. They're not needed. Single stats will work. Faster hit recovery works in here. You don't need this perfect gear. You really don't. But if you're trying to go for a high-end Orb Sorceress, this is how I personally would build it. And I'd build an energy shield. If you were going life, instead of energy, you would just dump your points into here. You wouldn't worry about energy shield or telekinesis. You wouldn't need lightning or chain lightning. And that would give you a little bit more points. Honestly, I'd probably start going into Blizzard and just doing Blizzard, Glacial Spike, Ice Blast, maxing as much of this as I can. It's really the only difference there. You will have more damage. If you're not using energy shield, you will care about your resistances a lot more. So that's my guide. I hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, please comment if you have questions. I try to answer everybody's questions best I can, and I really appreciate the rest of you guys out there that have been answering questions or trying to help with the comments. I do appreciate that. So I will talk to you guys later. I hope you enjoyed this. I do try to stream every day from at least 5 to 7 currently on East Coast time. I'll answer any of your questions there if you have it. So hopefully I can see you guys during the live stream, or I'll answer your comments whenever I see them. So best of luck to you guys. I hope you guys learned something, and I hope you enjoyed the guide. Thank you.